Well, thank you, Christine. I'm delighted to be here this evening to talk about one of my favorite places in San Antonio, the Land Heritage Institute. The title of the talk says that it is one of San Antonio's best kept secrets, which I think is true. And I'm hoping one of my goals tonight is that people will be able to see what a wonderful place it is, and will come and join us when it's open and see it for yourself. There are a lot of things to see and do there, which I'll talk about right at the end. For those of you who like a lot of photos and pretty slides, I will have some, just not at the beginning. Those will come a little later in the program because I think that the history of the property is really important to talk about. Let me think, there's one other thing I wanted to say. Mark Opelt, who is the chair of the board for the Land Heritage Institute, is he's here listening now, but if questions come up at the end that I may not be able to answer, hopefully I will be able to, but he'll be available just in case. So I'm going to go ahead and start.
Yeah.
Now, this is the entrance to the Land Heritage Institute. Actually, it's a couple of double gates, and this is to the right of the double gates. With literally thousands of years of history, the Land Heritage Institute property is, as I said, a little known gem, close to the southern edge of San Antonio. This land along the Bonita River provided the necessities for life for literally hundreds of generations of Native Americans, and also for quite a few generations of the other cultures that have shaped Texas over time. Now here's my hand-drawn map of the Land Heritage Institute in relationship to a couple of other places that are a little better known. Here on the left, we have the Medina River Natural Area. It's one of the city park system's natural areas. Up here, we have the Mitchell Lake Audubon Center, and it is right here by Mitchell Lake. Here's the Toyota plant. And, here is the Land Heritage Institute that I'm pointing to here. And this is the Medina River as it flows next to the Land Heritage Institute. We are right across the river from the Toyota plant. And that plays heavily in some of the history here. I'll show another slide in a couple of minutes that will show you the Land Heritage Institute itself, but you can see that Applewhite Road is over here. Neal Road is where our entrance is. Pleasanton Road is over on the right. 410 to the north of us, and actually almost due north of us, is downtown San Antonio. And then to the south of us is 1604. So I hope that gives you some idea of the area that we're talking about. So what is the Land Heritage Institute, you might ask yourself? It is a 1,200-acre living land museum dedicated to training youth, our next generation, our future conservationists. And we want them to know about how important it is to conserve our natural resources, as well as the histories and culture that have become part of the area, and the built environment, the historic structures that are there. The Institute promotes environmental literacy and sustainable practices by providing a resource for lifelong learners. So the youth and all the rest of us, I'm not youthful anymore, but all the rest of us who are lifelong learners to pursue the passions of life, art, hiking, horseback riding, and all forms of wildlife watching. Now here's my closer map for LHI. Let me put you in perspective again. Here's Neal Road that goes along the southern edge of the LHI. Here is the Toyota plant up here. This map does not show our whole property. Part of it is cut off on the right. It kind of goes down. Wait, hold on a second. I accidentally clicked there. Okay, it it goes along here and comes down to Neal Road over this way. And on the other side, it goes over almost to Applewhite, but not quite. So there is some more of the property over here. Okay, somebody's sleepy. I'll try to wake you up. Okay, so the entrance is off of Neal Road, and our main gate is right over here. It's not actually facing Neal Road. It's kind of almost at 90 degrees with Neal Road. There's a tiny little short road that goes up to it. And the main road into it, once you get inside, goes, follow my cursor here, it goes up like this and around like this and over to the headquarters. And if you come for a program, you'll be headed for the headquarters. Now, that road that I've just come up there, that's a paved road. And that's probably pretty much the only paved road.
Patsy, I'm sorry, you have to unmute yourself. I accidentally hit a button.
No, that's okay. So I don't know where I got muted, but I came up the paved road here up to the headquarters right here. And that's where you check in if you're here for a program or something like that. I'll talk a little bit about the longhorns that we have, but the pasture for the longhorns is over in this area. And if you come back out to the main road, it does turn mostly into a dirt road, but it comes up here and it goes to the Presnell-Watson Farmstead, the historic district. And we'll be talking about that historic district. You'll see some pictures of that in just a little while. And I'll have a picture of the corn crib. The corn crib area is down here. I'm just doing a few things so that you can kind of figure out where you are. And also the Medina River Greenway goes by, and it pretty much follows the river. It goes away from the river in some places, but it pretty much follows the Medina River. And I'm going to be showing a picture of a bridge over the Medina River, and that's going to be right up in this area. So, we're going to be talking about the ecosystems, so to speak, of the Land Heritage Institute, and the riparian area is right down here along the Medina River. The upland or savanna area is kind of over in this area. And then we have the South Texas scrub brush area on the western part of the property over here. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the extensive history of LHI, and I'm going to try not to talk too much. It's actually one of my favorite pieces of information, but I'll bore everybody out of their mind if I go through the whole, all the detail that I'd like to. So here's the gist of it. In the pre-Columbian period, we have evidence of 8,000 to 10,000 years of indigenous people living on this property. And I'll talk in a little while about how we have proof of the existence of those people. In the post-Columbian period, the Spanish government claimed this land as part of Spain. And then while it was Spain, there was in 1808, a man named Juan Ignacio Perez, who was a Spanish military officer, obtained a Spanish land grant of 5 leagues, which is a little over 13,000 acres of land. And that land included the LHI property. He was kind of quite influential in the Spanish owned days. He participated in the 1813 Battle of the Medina that crushed a Mexican independence movement. And there in Texas, very close to the LHI property, killing 800 to 1,000 of the rebels. It's said that that was the deadliest battle ever fought in Texas. And historians, as I understand it, are still arguing about where actually that battle took place, which is still kind of amazing. And some think that it occurred really close to the Land Heritage Institute along the Medina River at Applewhite Road. But that's only one of the options. And it sounds now like they're thinking it was a little farther to the west along the Medina. And looking back in Juan's family history, his grandfather, Jose Ontario Perez de Casanova, was part of the 16 Spanish Canary Islander families that came to Texas in March of 1731. So his family was there for a long time. And at one point, Juan served as the interim Spanish governor of Texas. So that Perez family was very influential in those days. In 1821, this area became part of Mexico. And I know that many of you are listening, attended maybe junior high school here, and they wouldn't let you out of junior high school in San Antonio anyway, without knowing some of this information about Texas becoming its own republic, etc. So in 1836, as you probably know, then Texas won independence from Mexico, and the property became part of the Republic of Texas. And then in 1837, I don't have that on here, but in 1837, I'm talking about the ownership of the land. Texas, the new Republic of Texas, granted a headright league, which included this property, to a man named Bruno Martinez. And over the next few years, the property changed hands several times. Then in 1845, it became part of the state of Texas, part of the United States. In 1852 and 1853, Stephen Applewhite and Harrison Presnell and their families, all from Louisiana, bought the property. And Stephen Applewhite took possession of the western 775 acres, and Harrison Presnell, whose wife Susan was a sister to Stephen Applewhite, received 665 acres on the east side of the property. The two families originally farmed their land as a cotton plantation until the Civil War. And as they farmed it, they worked, the farm itself was actually worked by 10 or 11 African-American slaves. After the Civil War, they turned to ranching. While they were there, the Applewhites built a small house of sandstone, which is the kind of stone that we have in that area, on the west side of the property. And unfortunately, only the overgrown foundation is still on that property today. The Presnell family, however, constructed a similar two-room house of sandstone on the east side of the property. And we're going to talk more about that house later. And one more little historical factoid before I move along. From the mid-1860s to the mid-1880s, the property became one of many great gathering points for the Great Western and Chisholm trails, on which cowboys drove longhorn cattle to railroads in various Midwestern Great Plains states. So there's Chisholm Trail involvement in this property too. All right. Now the Watson's house started as a two-room sandstone house, but the Watsons raised mules and cattle and registered horses. And over the years, they became a bit more prosperous. They came to the land in 1883. John Watson Sr., his wife, Margaret Jane, and their family moved to Texas from England and purchased the Presnell land. And later, they also bought the Applewhite land. So they started out with a two-room house. And then as they got more affluent, they started adding on to the house. So they made actually 4 additions to the house. That original two-room stone house is still inside of the house that we see. This picture was taken, well, it wasn't a picture, it's a picture of a portrait, a painting. And this painting was done as best as we can figure it around 1900 or so. And so this is down in the historic district. So the house is here. The big barn, we'll see later what's gone on there. The big barn is over here. And there was a huge pond in front of the house. The depression is still there, but it no longer holds water very well. So there's only water in there after a big rain. In 1926, let's see, no, in 1903, John Watson Sr. passed away, but his wife continued to live on the property. And they made their additions to the house along the way. They became pretty prosperous. And in 1926, 4 years before Margaret Jane Watson passed away, she divided the property amongst her children. And the son, John Watson Jr., inherited the house and 250 acres of the land. He and his wife, Cora, lived there until he passed away in 1944, and she lived there until she passed away in 1971. Members of the Watson family continued to ranch on former Applewhite and Fresno land for well over 100 years. And currently we have a herd of 50 purebred Longhorn cattle on the property, and that continues to pay tribute, I'd say, to the long ranching history there. And interestingly, selling their offspring helps to fund some of the work that we do at LHI.
What the hell?
Okay. So in 1974, the Watson, in 1974, the Watson family sold the Homestead district to a fellow named Earl S. Dodderer. And then in 1979, an interesting thing happened. The city of San Antonio authorized the city water board, which is now known as the San Antonio Water System, or SAWS, to proceed with plans for a construction of a reservoir that was to add supplemental drinking water for the city of San Antonio as it grew. And the proposed reservoir included the land, or the works around the reservoir included the land that is now LHI. Now, the reservoir was quite controversial from the very start, and many thought that it was going to be too shallow, that it would never be deep enough to prevent losing the water to evaporation in a really hot, dry summer. And in 1990, the city of San Antonio started purchasing the land that they needed. They did not complete the purchasing, however. They had to do, there were some archaeological surveys that needed to be done, and those were started, and they were headed up by Dr. Alston Toms of Texas A&M of College Station. Even before all of the archaeology work was done and the project was fully funded, the work on the spillway began. And some of the archaeology surveys then were running simultaneously with the digging of the spillway. And as luck would have it, Richard Bean, who was one of the engineers on the project, he was an inspector of the spillway, and who it turns out was an amateur archaeologist, one day watched a piece of big equipment that was scraping by, building the spillway 16 feet below the surface, and the former surface, and he noticed that all over the ground, what he saw was something that looked like the remains of old campfires and mussel shells. And he stopped all the scraping immediately and called over to Alston Toms, who was working fairly close by, and he said, "Come over and take a look at this." So Dr. Toms agreed with Bean's analysis. So the work was halted on the spillway until further archaeology work could be started and completed. Dr. Toms said later that if Bean had not stopped the work, it would have taken only 15 minutes more of scraping away to remove all the evidence of those campfires, and the history of the American Indian habitation here could have been lost for forever. And by the way, that original site, that location that Richard Bean's, where he stopped the work, is called the Richard Bean site in his honor. And before it was covered up to safeguard it until more work can be done, it, and there were other nearby sites as well, produced over 80,000 artifacts, indicating 8 to 10,000 years of American Indians living on that property in small family encampments. Evidence showed that they hunted deer and probably bison. They gathered pecans, prickly pear tunas, and roots of various plants from the savanna and the South Texas scrub brush areas, as well as fish, turtles, and mussels from the riparian area for food. Dr. Toms, who very sadly to many of us passed away just a few months ago, made studying the food ways of these American Indians a major part of his life work. Okay. Let's see. This was where the spillway was being built, right along in here. And that's where many of the archaeology digs were, although there were some other ones on the property. This area is now like a big valley, but that wasn't really there. It was recontoured. That whole area was recontoured during the course of the spillway building. So in 1992, the San Antonio City Council canceled the Applewhite Reservoir plan after 2 failed referendums to fund the project. But as I say, not all of the property for the proposed reservoir had been purchased. And so those parcels that hadn't been purchased remained with the owners. And for the better or the worse, the property that had already been purchased couldn't be returned or sold back to the owners because state laws prevent that sort of thing. So I'm showing you this map because there were 2 pieces of property contiguous with LHI property, actually sort of jutting into what seems like it should be LHI property. These pieces had not been purchased yet by the city of San Antonio. The orange area was recently purchased and is now a private family residence. And the yellow has been fairly recently purchased too. And the situation there is somewhat different. And I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. The yellow piece of property is about 18 and a half acres. And so once the project was canceled, then it was like, what do? We can't sell it back to the original owners. We can't give it back. What can we do? So the process of creating the concept that was to become the Land Heritage Institute took place over about 10 years. And that saved the property from potential development. Many people and organizations were involved in helping to decide what should happen to that land over time, including previous landowners, an organization called Friends of the Medina River, a couple of different American Indian organizations, outdoor advocates, local birding and native plant groups. I believe San Antonio Audubon was part of that group that was helping to decide. Some developers wanted to look at making the property available for subdivisions and building opportunities, but it helped the cause of saving it because Toyota made known to the city leaders that it wanted to build a plant, and the location it chose was just on the other side of the river from the Medina, other side of the Medina River from LHI. And Toyota insisted that they needed to have a 3-mile buffer zone for development around their property for various reasons. I don't know all the reasons, but I think that one of the reasons probably was to discourage possibilities of corporate espionage. It sounds odd to those of us who might never had to have worried about that, but somebody could sit up on a hill with a telescope and see what might be going on in the plant. So anyhow, this group that was putting the LHI together, as it turns out, they wanted to save the property as a natural area. And when Toyota wanted that as a buffer zone with almost no development, that group and the city of San Antonio in the end came to an agreement that a living land museum would be a good use for this plant, for this area. Now we'll go back real quickly to the history. So in 2002, LHI incorporated as a tax exempt corporation. And then in 2008, the city of San Antonio designated the Presnell Watson homestead as a city landmark. And then shortly after that, in 2009, the Presnell Watson homestead was listed on the National Register. Included in that National Register designation was the Presnell Watson house, the big barn that we're going to show. There was a small building behind the house made of that local sandstone also that was probably a kitchen, several other outbuildings, and a couple of water tanks, and a couple of dove cotes that were moved onto the property from across the river. And to finish off talking about the history, many descendants of those who lived and worked on this land, the Native Americans, the Spanish Canary Islanders, the Mexicans, the African Americans, and the Anglo Americans, continue to live close by and contribute to the community. So now we're going to look at a little bit of the built world on the property. And by the way, the photos that I'm going to be showing here are taken by the person that's listed on the photo. And if there's nobody else listed, I took the photos. So we've already talked about some of these buildings, but now you'll get to see some of them. This is the way the Presnell Watson house looks. I just took this picture in December when we were there doing the Christmas bird count. There's been a lot of work done on this structure. Advice early on was the first thing you've got to do is stabilize the foundation and make that roof waterproof. So that's been done. Several other things have been done too, but you'll notice there's been some really nice work done on these. This is the most recent thing that's happened on the 2 stories of front porch. And that's just been done in the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. Many of the funds for work on the Presnell Watson house came from the San Antonio, or the Conservation Society of San Antonio, which at that time was called the San Antonio Conservation Society. We hope one day to make this historic home into a museum, and with perhaps a room or 2 saved for lodging. And here's a historic barn. Now, I have to tell you, it didn't look like that just a few months ago, but last summer, we had a terrible windstorm down in that area. They called it a derecho, D-E-R-E-C-H-O, and it was straight line winds. And you may remember a roof on it was a Comfort Inn or a Quality Inn or a hotel or motel down there in not too far from LHI. Actually had its roof blown off. So in a way, I guess we're kind of lucky we didn't have any more damage than this. But at any rate, this is the way the barn looks right now. And it is in need of repair, and that repair will start soon. Here's one of the 2 dove cotes. They were not originally on this property, but when Toyota bought the property across the way, these were on the Walsh property where the Toyota plant now is. So they were moved over here. Unfortunately, the other one blew down in a storm, and this one still sits on the property, kind of on the other side of the barn from the house. And then here's the corn crib. This is a ways away from the Presnell Watson house. It's over near the what's left, the foundations of the Applewhite house. And inside the corn crib is a long-term art exhibit by an artist named Anson Seal. And the photos are colorful ears of corn. It's really neat if you ever get to go in there and see that. At least it was in there the last time I was in that building. And also, by the way, since we're birders, mini birders here, we've seen greater roadrunners quite frequently in this area, but we also see lizards there, which may be actually why the Roadrunner likes to hang out over there. The building on the right here is the headquarters building. This is where you check in if you come into the property for a program. We usually have, for years, we've had a second Saturday program in this building, or that starts out in this building. And we haven't had those since the pandemic started, but we hope to resume those soon again. And this is on the upland area. And here's the bunkhouse, the former bunkhouse. That was a really neat building that we had up until last year's Snowmageddon in mid-February. And unfortunately, it started on fire and it burned all the way to the ground. So it was a very sad thing. This bunkhouse was built on the property maybe 10 or 12 years ago, 8 to 10 years ago, to house the numerous AmeriCorps groups that we had come in and welcomed into the property. And those groups built the 20 miles of trail that we have inside of LHI over a period of years. So it's going to be replaced. The board just decided, or just voted, that it will be replaced by a barn-like event center using the footprint of this, but then it's going to have some outdoor areas around it. And that will be rentable, and we are hoping to use that property as a fundraiser for special events and that sort of thing. The Stream Center, I talked about working with youth. The Stream Center, Stream, S-T-R-E-A-M. It starts out with STEM, which most people who are in the educational world know something about, and it adds an R for reading and let's see, an A for the arts. So that's what that's about. It is an old Quonset hut that was brought onto the property some time ago. I think it's a World War II or Korean War Quonset hut. And then there are shipping containers on either side. The bathrooms are in the shipping containers, as well as some storage space and a little office space. And we're hoping to resume those classes once we're past the pandemic and people can get around more safely. We have had a number of scouts from the area do some special projects for us. The structure here on the left is a chimney swift tower, hoping to give chimney swifts in the area a place to bed down for the night. And then these are bat houses. So we're trying to give the bats a place to be too. And we also have, here's a butterfly information kiosk that one of the scouts built for us. Now we're going to look a little bit at the trails. This is a part of the Medina River Greenway that goes through the property close to the river. The Medina River Greenway is part of the 69 completed miles of the multi-use Howard Peak Greenway system. And then we have I call it the new bridge. Pretty soon it's not going to be the new bridge, it's just going to be the bridge. It was built a couple of years ago and that gets the trail across the Medina River. And this was on LHI property. And because the bridge, building of the bridge meant the loss of a goodly number of trees in that section of land of the Land Heritage Institute, the Greenway gave LHI money for planting a good number of new trees that we've planted in other areas of the property. And here's a sign for our trail system, our 20 miles of trail, the Los Caminos Naturales, which is the literal translation is the natural paths. And this one makes it look kind of dark. I think it was on a darker day, a cloudy day. Most of the trail is more open than that, and with a wider trail. And here's a piece of metal art close to the stream center. Earlier in the life of LHI, we focused on art exhibits, some of which are still on the property, and this is one of them. I have a few scenes here. This is the paved road, the main road into LHI. And this is looking down into the Medina River, the riparian area. And then this is some of that South Texas scrub brush area that I was talking about. So we have several, I don't have any, I only have one mammal picture, but of the wild mammals that we have, we do have bobcats and feral pigs. And as you probably can guess, we don't want the feral pigs there, but they seem to like us. And they are a real problem as they uproot native plants, increasing erosion issues on the property. And also they're very prolific animals. One mama pig, feral pig, can put out a lot of babies in a year. We're currently working to reduce the numbers at the Land Heritage Institute. Now I've got a few photos of some of the aspects of the natural world for you. This is an Audubon's Oriole. And one time we were here for we did the Christmas bird count at Land Heritage Institute, and we managed to see an American woodcock, which was a very unusual find on the Christmas bird count. Well, actually, it's a pretty unusual bird in the county. And so there were several people who wanted to come out the first part of January and see whether we could find it again, but we couldn't. But instead, we found an Audubon's Oriole. And that was very exciting because it's rare to see in Bexar County any time of the year, but it was a beauty. And it was right down in the riparian area on the other side of the Medina River from LHI. And it just shone out like a beacon. It was absolutely beautiful. Chris Bailey was with the group that day and he got this photo. We we have seen dick sissels on the property. It breeds in our area, but it's not a particularly common bird. You see them a lot more to the north of us. In fact, the first one Alan ever saw was in Iowa. And they get he's on a mesquite. And I mean, he was singing his heart out looking for a gal that day. It was really fun to hear him. And people say that the call sounds like he's saying his name is like cheep, cheep, dick sizzle, cheep, cheep, dick sizzle, kind of like that. There's a great crested flycatcher in the top of a mesquite tree again. The tops of trees are very popular over there. And obviously for the bird, it gives them a great viewpoint to see something that they might want to eat, or if there are anybody for whom they are prey coming their way. I just thought this was a neat picture. I took this at the Christmas bird count. There's a red-shouldered hawk on the left and a crested carrot on the right, carrot on the right. And some white pelicans coming over as a flock. We saw that. I think we were at the headquarters when we saw those. Wood stork with a black vulture. We were there with leading a group, and it was amazing. Coming down the river was a group of black vultures, and somebody said, wait, that's not a black vulture. And Patty Leslie Pasteur got this photo of a wood stork. It's very rare. It's rare or very rare to see one in Bexar County. Last year at the Christmas bird count, we had mountain bluebirds, which are kind of an unusual find. There were a couple of little groups of mountain bluebirds in Bexar County, actually, last year. And we had so much fun seeing that we came back a little bit later, early January, and we found them again. And this time, those are two tails. Both of these birds were in a hole and they were checking out a potential nesting site. It would have been pretty early to nest, but they were checking it out. Here's a painted bunting. We see them in the tops of mesquite trees like that, but we also more often maybe even see them taking a sand bath in the path. And we have verdins here. We don't often see them. They're kind of hidden most of the time, but occasionally we do get a good time to take a picture of them. They nest there, by the way. Cedar waxwings, we often see larger groups of cedar waxwings. This was taken last January, and they were eating the white berries of the mistletoe. I've seen them, they eat berries. I've seen them eat all kinds of berries, but I've never seen them eat the berries on mistletoe. They probably do all the time, and I just hadn't seen it. And here's a Vesper sparrow. We get a lot of winter sparrows at LHI. I like this picture because this guy looks like he's kind of checking me out, just like I was checking him out. And here's evidence of a loggerhead shrike in the area. And don't spend too much time thinking about this if you don't like to look at dead things, but this is an impaled grasshopper, which is kind of what loggerhead shrikes do. They like grasshoppers a lot and other bugs, and they impale their prey on thorns like this to kill them. And actually, sometimes they seem to use it as storage too. We did have a sighting of a golden-cheeked warbler here. We found out that 150 years before, now this was in 2014, we took that, Chris Bailey took that photo, and we commemorated the 150th sighting of the first golden-cheeked warbler in Texas. And that happened fairly close to LHI by one of the Watson relatives. And we want to just commemorate that fact, and be darned if a group did not go down to the river, and amongst a bunch of other warblers, here was a golden-cheeked warbler. So we got to see one again. And I'm going to go through, I just started taking pictures in the last year and a half or so of butterflies. So I can't let you get away without seeing some butterflies. Here's a bordered patch. These were taken mostly, these were all taken actually. I think it was a nice fall day. Alan and I went down there on an open day, and there was a lot of cowpin daisies. There were a lot of cowpin daisies in the headquarters area all around the border. And so we ended up, that's where I got most of these butterflies. And here's a cloudless sulfur. And it's either a common checkered skipper or a white checkered skipper. I'm told you can't tell the difference between the two of them unless you dissect them, and we don't want to do that. So here's a dainty sulfur. That is the smallest sulfur we have in Bexar County. And here's the little sulfur. It's a tiny bit bigger than the dainty sulfur, but it's pretty little. And here's a red admiral that was drinking some sap from a tree, which I thought was a little unusual. I don't know what kind of tree that was. And here's an orange sulfur, which I just think is a gorgeous butterfly. I love the big old green eye there. And here's a sleepy sulfur. And I have to tell you, we had a sleepy sulfur in our house today. Alan went out and mowed and mulched the leaves in the yard, and one came in on his blue jeans. So we were able to get it out, but there still are a few butterflies around, even though it's gotten cold. Here's some harvester ants. We are giving more and more harvester ant beds every year. And these are traditional tasty victuals for horned toads. So we're hoping that we will get some horned toads back at some time. Here's a checkered garter snake. We do have poisonous snakes too, rattlesnakes, water moccasins, etc. I don't want that to discourage you from coming, but I do want to discourage you from wearing flip-flops if you come in to hike. A few trees and vegetation. That was Palo Verde. This is Spanish dagger in bloom. Scarlet musk flower. This is one of my favorite flowers. It's getting pretty hard to find, and that was at LHI. Here's a nice assortment of spring wildflowers. Here's some blooming prickly pear. And if you don't know what a tuna is, the remnants of after the blooms fall off, that little piece that's on there is called a tuna. I said that the American Indians ate the tuna. Here's some Turk's cap down in the riparian area. And now here's my only kind of domesticated animal I'm gonna have. This is one of the registered longhorns that was in the pasture that day. And now, that's my slides mostly. What does the near future bring for LHI? Well, we have to repair the historic barn. We want to restart the stream center work with school children whenever the pandemic calms down enough for us, for the schools and for us to feel comfortable with that. The construction of the rentable event building where the bunkhouse burned down is in progress. We have a piece of art. It's a big monarch butterfly. It's solar lit, and it is coming back after being out on long-term loan. And we're going to construct a pollinator garden near where it's placed, and it's going to be placed close to the stream center. We have possible opportunities for horned toad reintroduction. We have the harvester ants, but the bad news is we also have fire ants, and that's not good for horned toads. But we may be able to, we might have areas in LHI, it's so big, that don't have a lot of fire ants that could be a good possible place for reintroduction. Also, we were told that sometimes where they're growing them, raising them for other reintroductions down at the zoo, they sometimes need not fire ants, they sometimes need harvester ants, and they might come and vacuum some up from us and take them, and we'd be good with that. And then we want to work on obtaining funding, obviously, for further conservation efforts here. What's happening nearby? There's a potential solar farm coming in nearby on old Bill Miller property to the east of us and to the southeast of us. The neighbor I was talking about earlier is working on rezoning. We're very concerned about that. The story is that he's looking at either having a rodeo or some kind of a nightclub. And we have some real issues and concerns about that. He tried to do the rezoning once. We took back his request because we did a little writing campaign. We may need to ask others to help us if he comes back again. The concerns that we have are noise pollution. We're a natural area, and the concerns are noise pollution, light pollution, potential trespassing, potential destruction of property, potential for fires from improper disposal of cigarette butts, etc. And also Texas A&M is going to be growing, and I read an article recently that said they would wanted to have grown to the south between them and the Toyota plant, but they're going to have to grow to the east or north, and they may have to remove some more trees because to the south of them, between them and Toyota, is part of that 3-mile buffer zone. So we encourage you, we invite you to visit LHI. Our gates are open the second and third Saturdays right now during these cooler months from 8 to 4. And or you can make special arrangements for entry for groups of 10 or more. And then during the warmer months, we're only open on one Saturday a month. That's the second Saturday. So here are some of the fun things you can do. You can hike. You can practice your photography on all kinds of things. You can bird watch, butterfly watch, horseback ride, study the plants, check out these wonderful old historic buildings that we have. Join an organized walk. Alan and I are leading one for San Antonio Audubon on, I believe it's Saturday, March 19th, starting at 8:30. So you'd be welcome to join us there. You can go on the San Antonio Audubon website and find out about that. You can hold a special event here in any of several buildings now that will be available for that. Weddings, quinceaneras, anniversary parties, etc. You can camp out overnight in groups of 4 campsites or more. And you can encourage schools to use LHI for its outdoor learning. You can also volunteer your time, maybe even help create that pollinator garden that we're talking about by the artwork that's coming back, or donate money to support the work of LHI. And remember, you can bike or hike along the Medina River section of the Howard Peak Greenway Trail as it runs through our property anytime the Greenway Trail is open. And I think that's from dawn to dusk. And I do understand that some of the sections nearby us may be closed for work soon. So you always need to check before you go to see if they're open for business. So I think I want to conclude by inviting you to come and enjoy LHI, an amazing little known property that teaches children and all of us to be good conservators of our environment and natural resources and historic buildings, and that helps us preserve our histories and the many cultures that have been here, hope and for generations to come. So my last slide is the end. And I wish this were, I could hear people talking because you have to wonder what that is. That is a bird there. Since this is Audubon Society, I need to finish off with a bird. This is a turkey. We do see turkeys on the property. We've seen some up close. Always when you come close, they're very scared and they will run away. This is kind of the best view that you usually get of a turkey if you get a view at all. So that is the end of my program. And Christine, I'll stop the share and turn it over to you to see if we have questions. Is that all right, Christine?
It's perfect, Patsy. Thank you so much. That was really interesting.
Okay.
There's one question in the chat, and then of course, if anybody else has questions, feel free to unmute and ask Patsy yourself. So Patsy, in the chat, let me go back to it. Someone asked, who did the Applewhite and Presnell families buy the property from?
It was one of the last owners. It changed several hands. I can't remember the name exactly right off. I'd have to look back. I have that someplace, but I first started the litany of people that it had changed hands to, and Alan convinced me that I shouldn't do that. So, and actually it would have gotten pretty tedious. So I apologize. I don't know the answer to that question right off.
No, that's okay. It's always nice to have unanswered questions.
There's one thing. This is Mark, Patsy.
Yeah, good.
I would just add in that little litany of all the people that it changed hands. The interesting thing about it is that it occurred, you know, of course, after the revolution. And so it happened quite often in a lot of South Texas because the land was granted by the state to usually a veteran of the Revolutionary War of Texas. And then they took in turn sold that, which in turn sold it again. So it became sort of a little land sale flurry after that time. So that's why there were so many that happened in such a short period of time. And
Yes.
I believe the name of the last owner before the Presnells and Applewhite family bought it, I think it was either, I'm pretty sure it was Armstrong or Livingston, but anyway, they weren't the one who was the Revolutionary War veteran, but they bought it from somebody who did buy it from one. So it's like that kind of a thing. So.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, the fellow who got it, the headwright was Bruno Martinez. And then he sold it the same day. And then, you know, lots of times people didn't keep it very long at all. It was sort of it looks like it was there was some speculation there going on.
Well, and Bruno Martinez was actually like a broker type. If you look at the land maps at that area, Bruno Martinez had put his stamp on about probably 40,000 acres in this area, and then proceeded to, you know, it was all then divvied up in different sales to different people, you know. So it's a really interesting. The TexasTejano.com website has a great map on their website that shows the property just after the Revolutionary War, so you can see all the individual parcels that were created. So it's an interesting land history.
Thanks, Mark. That's great. Great addition.
Yeah, that was really interesting, Mark. Any other questions for Patsy's?
Yeah, was it ever known whether what is now the brush country, was it ever part of the cotton farmland and was reverted after it stopped into the brush country, or what parts of the farm, what parts were in cotton? Is it known?
Well, I have to say, I'm glad Mark is here because I'm gonna
I'm
flip that over to him.
happy to. So when the Presnell and Applewhite's family bought the farm originally, and a lot of this history is family history because Peggy is her mother was a Watson, so she has some of the original history behind it. It was cleared back in between 1850 and 1865 and farmed pretty heavily. And then over time, as it became ranching, it became more grassland, but still farmed all the way through until about probably of the 1,150 acres, 400 acres of it is in riparian area, and about the rest of it was actually probably mostly open farmland. And actually the Quonset hut was a structure that was built by the Ford Motor Company. And for about a 20-year period, they had a tractor test site at that location, and they farmed the fields around there. And so of course, once the city bought the property, all of that stopped. And then it sat fallow for literally 20 years after the Applewhite project was abandoned. And so all of the regrowth that we're seeing of the mesquite trees and a lot of the brush area is basically regrowth that has happened since about 1990. And so now the riparian area, I will say, and I wish we had a former board member who kept her thumb on the actual untouched riparian areas in Texas. I think of all the riparian area in Texas, there's less than 5% that has been untouched by some sort of development. And our 4 miles of riparian area, 400 acres, is untouched by any development, you know? And so it's just like it's been, you know, forever. And as it's, you know, as it's kind of continued to regrow itself. But so that's a little bit on the land history.
I would say that the only part of the riparian area that's been disturbed is where they had started to build the spillway.
Yeah, thank you, Patsy. That is the sad part, because that part of the riparian area that's currently semi-open with much newer trees at one point was a huge pecan bottom, and we can remember them hauling out of the bottom of that thing truckloads of cut timber from pecan trees that were probably 5 foot in diameter, you know, probably, you know, 200 or 300 of them that were removed because it happened to be in the spillway area in the lower part of where the dam was constructed. So there was some definitely a few changes that affected about, out of the 400 acres of riparian area, is probably about 60 acres that was really heavily damaged by the dam construction back in the 1980s, late 1980s.
So the riparian area does have had changes. You know, I've walked the riparian areas and there are roads down there and stuff. So I guess trees have came and gone, and different things have happened down there. It certainly does. There's certainly wilder looking riparian areas that I've observed.
Oh,
you know,
I don't know. Okay, you probably have been in the riparian area that we were just talking about. That was, but if you follow the river, and the trail does not go down in these riparian areas. It was so wild the city couldn't even figure out how to design a trail there. Now, if you'll come on a second Saturday and ask me for a guided hike, I'll take you to some areas that are where, you know, probably part of the 300 acres that are untouched. And you'll understand what I'm talking about. Because you can't see those from the paved trail.
Right.
You can only see those from our unpaved trails that go down into the actual river bottom.
Are you getting any other questions, Christine?
Have any questions? If not, this is recorded, and so it's great to have Mark's input on some of that we're recording. Patsy, thank you. This is so interesting. You know, I haven't been there in a while, so I'm going to try to make a point to get to that March walk.
We'd love to have you. That'd be fun.
That'll be real interesting. And I encourage everybody to go on that walk or the second Saturday walks and check out a pretty interesting piece of property in San Antonio. So if there's no more questions, we're going to end the meeting. I'm going to stop the recording. And